There's a little crab out this morning. Hey. That little crab went underneath the dock. So we had a lot of rain, so I guess he crawled up out of the marsh. You don't see him up here on the dock very often. So warm Saturday, warm and humid. It's been raining. But summertime is coming. It's still spring. Times change. We have to. Life is all about change. And the universe is about change. If you think about the idea of change and how important it is, it gives you a better perspective on it, because change can be exciting and we can look forward to change. Change can be a time that creates a lot of growth in our life if the change is happening to us. The change is happening out there in the environment somewhere. It creates a lot of growth, or a cycle of growth. The seasons of change. Everything kind of withers away when it gets cold, and then the warmth of the sun coming up, and in the springtime creates a whole new rebirth of life. And anyhow, we call that change is part of this concept that we call related to dynamics, or I think dynamics, or I think we call it the dynamism. But anyhow, and I guess there's a study of that as well. So if you think about dynamics just means things that change, but it's can also be kind of thought of as the science of change. And so if sometimes we say a person is very dynamic, and that's a little bit of a different use for the term, but it still means that that's a person who is doing a lot of different things with their life or their skill set. Hey, good morning. And so a dynamic athlete, for example, is an athlete who can do a lot of different things, a lot of different skills on, say, whatever sport they're playing, or maybe they play multiple sports. That's a dynamic athlete, a dynamic personality. But in terms of physics, dynamics, it has a lot to do with the way things interact. So when something changes, it doesn't just change that thing, it affects the other things around it. And that just carries right through to people too. And I don't really think there's that much of a separation in that sense, between what happens with people and what happens in physics. It's just that with people, we have an intellect and a consciousness that we're aware of, and so it takes on a different scope. But I still think it's, in the most sense, the same processes, the same math. How the same thing with epidemiology is, where the study of epidemiology is the mathematics behind that are also like the same math that's behind any kind of network of whether that's dealing with living organisms, or with, say, computer networks or that sort of thing. So those kinds of the mathematics of dynamics, and how things ripple through a physical environment, I think are pretty much the same principles that happen with people. It's just that there's a social aspect to it. So when a person changes, or a group changes, or an environment that a group's in, or an economy changes, it changes all the different characters and parts that it connects to. And this idea of not being there never being a perfect state is important. So science and physicists kind of proved the point that the universe can't be exactly perfect. If it was exactly perfect, then everything would just come to a steady state of rest, and we wouldn't have change. It wouldn't be dynamic. And so if the universe wasn't dynamic, if we didn't have change, it would essentially be frozen, and there would be no growth and no change and no life and all of those kinds of things. So in our lives, we need to be aware of change, aware of dynamics, and the different ways that they can make us feel, and the fact that things don't change. You might not know what the change is that's coming. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But you can prepare either way. You can know with 100% certainty that things are going to change in the future, and you also can be 100% certain that certain aspects of your life are also going to be repeating unless you also instigate change. So a lot of change comes at us from the outside in. So the outside world creates the change that affects us. But there's also a very important change that we take the initiative on. So we say something has to change, and then we need to change it, and that's hard. But either way, you can create practices. Your mind and your spirit, and you being a strong, smart young lady, can instill within yourself, with practice, the ability to both anticipate and knowing that there's going to be change in the future, so that you have plans, that you have processes in place to be ready for change and to take advantage of change, or to avoid disaster when change comes, or whatever it might be. A lot of times the religious organizations that we're a part of have one of the great things that they've done for their people in churches and whatnot is that they have kind of codified plans, if people will follow them, for being prepared for change. And different groups have different ways that they do that, but they've, from some past experience that they've had, whether it was either in the Bible or something that a group of people experienced, their ancestors experienced directly, they said, hey, we need to be prepared for this if it comes again. And so they've put in place certain things to have themselves prepared for that. Now, that doesn't mean you have to go all in on other people's ideas of what preparedness means. Sometimes they can be vastly wrong or overboard, or they can become overly infatuated with that idea, and to the point that it paralyzes them, and that's all they think about and do. And that can become what we call sort of like a cult mentality. We need to be very, very careful about knowing where to draw lines and being our own person, and not just being a puppet for other people. But nevertheless, normally it's a good thing when groups of people have had experiences and they've set in good practices to be prepared for those changes that might come again in the future. But you yourself, as an individual, can implement these kinds of practices in saving certain amounts of money, teaching yourself continuously new things so that you can understand things and be flexible with the changing world, and also so that you can be strong and know that you can move yourself from an environment that you're not happy in to one that you're maybe more nourishing to your life. And so these things are all the beauty and importance of change. But you can be grateful for change, because without it, we would not have a life. There would not be a life if the change and dynamics was not a part of it. And it is something we need to embrace as a good thing, although it can be both very exciting and pleasant, and also can be very scary, and it can also be painful. So having your mind set to expect change and to know that it's a part of life and nature for every single living thing on this planet, it's very important. So I love you.